fascinating facts. This is the man from yesterday. And back in time we go to this time in 1972. ABC TV is going to introduce a new half-hour animated comedy musical series called The Osmonds. On Saturday mornings beginning in September, all 6 Osmond brothers will do the voices. Time in 1988, look for another horror film, this one about a possessed doll named Chucky. Child's Play will be out around Halloween here in 1988.
You know perfectly well that you're making this up. Now, you don't really think that Chucky is alive, do you?
But he is.
Andy, stop it!
From about this time in 1966, it looks like the sitcom Green Acres on CBS TV is a big hit. You can catch it on Wednesday nights right before the Dick Van Dyke Show.
The chores!
When did our ancestors leave the trees and begin to lead a life on solid ground? Some real-life CSI has given us a big clue. Lucy, the 3-million-year-old skeleton of one of our oldest known human relatives, was recently on a museum tour of the United States. During her visit, University of Texas scientists examined her skeleton with geological CT
KCAA Loma Linda. The Legacy KCAA 1050 AM and Express 106.5 FM.
Are you graduating high school soon and wondering what to do next? College is one option, but why not consider the high-paying jobs made possible by union power? Labor Union Teamsters Local 1932 has opened a training center to get you into the high school to high-paying job pipeline. You'll learn all the skills needed to excel in opportunities across industries. Visit 1932trainingscenter.org to enroll today. That's 1932trainingscenter.org.
Are you underpaid and overworked? Is a living wage and employee benefits like affordable health care more of a dream than a reality for you and your family? If so, it's time to form a union. Don't be denied the wages and benefits you deserve. Come together in a union with the power of numbers. A union is not a privilege, it's your right, and it will make a difference. Contact Teamsters Local 1932, a powerful and successful labor union in San Bernardino, by visiting teamsters1932.org/organize to start today. Labor unions built the middle class, and the middle class built America. That's the message from Teamsters Local 1932, a strong and successful labor union based in San Bernardino that represents over 14,000 hardworking people across the Inland Empire. The Teamsters are ready to help you organize for better pay, increased benefits, and improved working conditions. Reach out to Teamsters 1932 at teamsters1932.org/organize to speak with an organizer today.
Are you looking for a good union job? The Inland Empire's 14,000 members strong Teamsters Local 1932 has opened a training center to get working people trained and placed in open positions in public service clerical work and in jobs in the logistics industry. This is a new opportunity to advance your career and raise standards across the region. Visit 1932trainingscenter.org to enroll today. That's 1932trainingscenter.org. Are you graduating high school soon and wondering what to do next? College is one option, but why not consider the high-paying jobs made possible by union power? Labor Union Teamsters Local 1932 has opened a training center to get you into the high school to high-paying job pipeline. You'll learn all the skills needed to excel in opportunities across industries. Visit 1932trainingscenter.org to enroll today. That's 1932trainingscenter.org.
Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Been focusing on Republicans doing this little pivot thing it's coming. Trust me, the pivot is coming. They're trying to cast themselves as the workers' party. I don't know if you've been paying attention to this, but they've really been trying to make that, take that family values thing. that they don't really buy into, and moving it towards the family party, the parents party. And that's one that I've heard popped around a couple of times. They're now the parents party. And it's like all the things that the right has mastered over the years. They're the pro-family party, so you have to be anti. They're the pro-life people, so you have to be against life. Go down the list. What they do masterfully, like all their arguments. It's either black or white, right or wrong, good or bad, especially with them being white, right, and good. Life's not that simple, but it's what we're seeing. And what's happening is they're trying to paint this Leave It to Beaver-esque image of the future, with interesting, less corporate dominance, less corporate control, and a little bit less fear of socialism. No, they're not going to call it socialism. We'll come up with some cute little name like workfare or faith-based initiatives. We'll find something. And the reason I bring this up is today over at the New York Times, a conservative think tank, Ethics and Public Policy Center, guy wrote an op-ed. And the op-ed does a nice job of kind of spinning, doing a little spin toward the parents' party, the family values, working class party of, parents just want, they want good things for their kids. Now understand, I've been saying for years, we all want the same stuff. We all want good schools for our children. We all want safe neighborhoods. We all want good jobs. We all want health care, education. You go down the list. I think everyone, once you take off the red hat and the blue hat, everyone wants the same thing. Now they're trying to stake their flag in the ground. And understand, a think tank's been working on how to spin this. And what they're coming out with is, the current Republican Party's good at the culture war stuff. But they don't offer any policy solutions. And this is something that I've been saying for years. Republicans hate working people. Look at their policies. They've got nothing. There's no policy aims. This, my friends, the beginning of getting the Republican Party to come up with policies that they can then take, and shame on Democrats for not having already done this. But they're going, look, we're going to reach out to parents because, those evil Democrats, the woke, because we're going to hear a lot of woke stuff. They want your children inundated with all of this extreme stuff. And this is one of those moments where the left, they do this to themselves. Democrats do this to themselves. Because the drag show thing is a perfect example. Perfect example. When the Republicans choose to attack drag queens, they don't really care about drag queens. What they care about is the divisive issue. What they want is Democrats and the left to lose their minds and wrap themselves in the rainbow flag and march with all of the pageantry of drag queens and all of the displays of support for the trans community and all this stuff, so that they can go to people who don't care, going, pick a side, black or white, right or wrong, good or bad. And the Democrats and the left do this all the time. They do it to themselves. It comes up, and the first thing they do is they wrap themselves in that rainbow flag, and they go, instead of wrapping themselves in the American flag and saying, look, the reality is I may not agree or like what they do, but I support their right to do it. It's about free expression. It's about life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. We don't do this well, and this is what Republicans have done masterfully. Because they know they're going to be able to go to middle America. They're going to be able to go to that uneducated white working class and go, look, pick a side. Pick a side. You got this over here wrapped in the rainbow flag. You don't want your children doing this. Or us, the good family values people. Now, they don't like either side. They don't, because they know over here the good family values people are crazy and have horrible policies or no policies. But when they give you that binary choice, well, they're hoping that people are going to steer in their direction. Now, you've got this guy going, hey, here's some ways that we move policy to entice these people, because we got them running from the rainbow flag, got them coming. We got to keep them with policy. And he's saying, look, there are 5 ways that we should be moving pro-family, parent party kind of values. One of them, improving the child tax credit. A little socialism, a little sweetening of the pot to encourage people to have children, because you're going to make people have children. And one of the biggest attacks that I have on the right is, okay, you're pro-birth. What do you do when those kids are born? Well, the think tank here is now coming out and saying, look, little money in the pocket, as long as you have a job. Now, again, if you've listened to this show for a while, you know that I'm against welfare programs. Everything should be a jobs program. Everything should be a jobs program. There should be no handouts. The old adage of, you want to eat, you got to work. Because this way you can't divide people. And what I know is the public sector can't, or more likely won't, create enough jobs for everyone. The public sector has to. So everyone has to work. And then earned income tax credit can subsidize to make people have a better life so that they can support their kids and give them opportunities and move forward. And you create this culture of moving forward and up instead of holding down and tearing back. Because it's interesting. One of the things that they talk about in their 5 master points is promoting strong families, involving fatherhood. And as a kid growing up in the projects back in the 70s, I do remember it was government policy that tore the families apart. It was conservative policies that did that said, hey, if you're on ADC, aid to dependent children, like my mother and I, the food stamps of that era, if you're on this, no man in the house. So they were literally breaking up homes. And they used to have inspectors come and check. They used to come and knock on the door and go, well, let's take a look around. And there better not be a sign of a man there. That policy began breaking up families. Again, good, God-fearing Christians, they're the ones who did this because we don't want lazy people doing nothing. He talks about protecting kids online, like they're the only ones who want to protect our children. I don't want pornography available for my kids. I don't want the poison of a lot of the social media available at my children's fingertips. I would be in favor of that. And they understand this. They've done the polling. But here again, comes back to, they keep saying it's about parental rights, but we know what that means. That means culture wars. That means CTE. That means drag shows. That means school choice. At the end of it, it's about destroying public education and putting, Education Incorporated in charge of your children's future. And it's also about a little bit of socialism. Going to change the name a little bit, but a little bit of socialism. So you got the tax credits. You got the protecting kids online from predators, and all on board. And I'm on board with the tax credits as well. Supporting new parents, and I don't know what that really means. In my view, supporting new parents could mean, healthcare, making sure that every mother has access to prenatal care all the way through delivery, and then, child care, or, health care for the kid and the mother through 18, maternity leave, child care. There's a lot that goes in good education systems, opportunities for college. There's a lot of support for parents. They don't really go into that. Just like involving fatherhood. I'm not quite sure what that means either. I assume it's a lot of grievance. And then they go into the tax thing, because every conservative policy always has to come down to a tax thing. More tax cuts, more giveaways, and presumably, they don't really go into who, but grievance. There's a marriage penalty, and I'm going, I don't remember this it's not that big of a deal. But it's about starving government. So again, there's a lot of the conservative ideology in there, but cloaked in we're pro-family values. Now, this guy goes into talking about, the difference between high school educated, college educated, and really points a focus on the Democratic base of college-educated Democrats, because they're the ones who are opposed to a lot of this stuff. So the argument he's making is going, look, we can take out that base and we can move voters in our direction by doing what Democrats have been wanting to do for a while, which is ensure that there is a way for families to be able to support themselves. Now, me, as a union guy, comes back to if we had stronger unions, if we had the ability to have a single wage earner, to be able to put food on the table, a roof over their heads, opportunities for the future, save for future, whatever, retirement, college, and have one person stay home and raise the children, good family value stuff. If we had the true Leave It to Beaver-esque kind of situation, that fortunately, thanks to my union job, my wife and I are able to give our children, that would be better for society as well. But you're never going to hear the Republicans talk about that. Everything else is some kind of a gimmick. For instance, one of the things that they talk about, paid leave, maternity leave, Romney's Family Security Act, which means that you're going to have to borrow from your Social Security if you take maternity leave. They don't tell you that, because at the end of the day, it's about cheap labor. At the end of the day, it's about getting those people into jobs and keeping people desperate. Now, in his piece, he does hit the right point. He says the Biden administration, and I would say Democrats as a whole, have failed to push through their grand vision for progressive family policy and has left room for others to act. Because at the end of the day, all people really want, they don't want to know about the red hat or the blue hat. They want to know, are you going to make my life better? And this is where, again, Democrats have dropped the ball. And I'll give you an example. Tucker Carlson was being interviewed by Ben Shapiro. And Shapiro said, the future are automated trucks. These automated trucks are coming. What do you think of automated trucks? Are you in favor of this? And he's like, absolutely not. It's a horrible idea. It should never be allowed to happen. These jobs are, high school educated men take these jobs, millions of them. It is the number one job for high school educated men in this country. It would break the social compact. He actually said that. And you go, wow, oh my God, something that Tucker Carlson and I actually agree on. Now, understand, I've said from the beginning on this issue that I think there should be a technology tax, that we should be making the drivers who are going to lose these jobs whole for the rest of their lives and make it much more expensive to move towards these automated jobs so that the winners don't win immediately and we have time to adjust, that the working class doesn't take it on the chin. Because I know there's no stopping technology. And Tucker Carlson knows this too. The reality is this AI stuff is an overloaded truck going downhill in neutral with no driver. You're not stopping it. He knows it. I know it. The difference is he's going, no, I would never allow it. And people are going to go, yeah, he cares about us. He doesn't care about working people. He understands messaging. I'm trying to find a solution. I'm trying to make sure that working people are okay, that they don't take it on the chin again. And this is the difference between what the fake news on the right does and actually getting things done. And Democrats have to figure this out. The same person who sent me the clip of Tucker and Shapiro, asked me why Governor Tom Wolf signed the automation bill here in Pennsylvania. I still don't have an answer for him. Because the reality is this, again, is another moment where Democrats are going to end up taking it on the chin. And Republicans are going to go, see, we were against it. When ultimately, they aren't. Because they know, like everybody else, you're not stopping this monster. Now, if we all came together, red hat, blue hat, and said we want it to stop, we might have a shot. We might have a shot at any change. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
We are AFGE, the American Federation of Government Employees. We represent 700,000 federal and D.C. government workers who are the vital threads of the fabric of American life. We support our nation's military. We take care of our nation's veterans. We protect our nation's borders. We respond to our nation's crises and natural disasters. We provide services to our nation's seniors. The American Federation of Government Employees. We work for America.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So I was reminded that 10 years ago today, I was marching in the streets with J-1 visa workers from Asia. Yeah, figure that one out. Evidently, what had happened is you got a bunch of workers that came to this country on J-1 visas, which are meant to be people who come here not to work. A J-1 visa is not a work visa, but it's one that the people come to get the American experience. And what you had these Asian workers coming for the American experience, working at a McDonald's locally, who were living 8 to 10 in the basement of some shack around the corner and being abused. I mean, working 20-hour shifts, not being paid overtime, all kinds of stuff. And we went and protested the treatment of these workers. And I said at the time, I go, what these workers did is, and the argument I would make if I were the McDonald's owner, is that I'm giving them the ultimate cultural experience of a low-waged worker in America. Exploitable, desperate, abusable. And, it obviously did not go well. But at the time, they ended up firing them. There was a whole bunch of ugliness that went around this. And eventually there was some push to get the J-1 stuff stopped. But we're moving in another direction, because every time corporate America needs some cheap labor, they figure out a way around the rules. So what are they doing now? You look at that child labor bill in Iowa. Ohio has just passed out of a Senate committee, a child labor bill with bipartisan support, weakening child labor laws. You look at Sarah Huckabee Sanders in Arkansas. They're about to make a system where if you're 9 years old, you don't even need to get a work permit. Let that sink in for a minute. We're moving in a direction where, well, if you're desperate enough, hungry enough to work in poverty conditions for desperation wages, hey, it's your freedom. It's your choice. Scary stuff. Let's go to the phones. Got Alice on one. Alice, how are you?
I'm doing better. How about you?
I won't complain. What's on your mind?
Okay, so what I wanted to say is, for some odd reason, it seems that the Republican Party and Putin and his gang seem to be going hand in hand and passing similar laws. And it's the same old thing, just a different century.
Yeah.
This is the same thing that Germany did. If you look, and it all goes back to you forcing their so-called religious values on the rest of us. It's just the same old playbook over and over. And they come off with wonderful ways of explaining it. Then everybody goes, oh, great, that sounds wonderful, until it doesn't once it's passed.
Yeah.
So, the very people that need to learn from history, who are little snowflakes and cry, oh, my God, it hurt our feelings, are the ones that need to learn about history. But you have a good evening, Rick.
Thanks, Alice. Appreciate the thoughts. No, I mean, you think of their language. It is focus group tested, think tank approved. because they spend a lot of time and energy on messaging. They understand the power of radio and TV and messaging and social media. They understand. They understand fear. And that's where they live. They live in scaring the you-know-what out of people because, hey, those drag queens are coming for you. But you stop and you think about over the last 40 years, it's been conservative ideology and conservative policies that have caused the breakdown of the family, that have caused the standard of living in this country to stagnate and to actually go backwards. It's their policies that harm the working class, and yet because of these culture issues, again, we're blinded. Thomas Frank's, what's the matter with Kansas? They found, people, felt helpless in dealing with the economic stuff, but the stuff that they could control, that's what they grabbed onto. And this is the same thing. This is the argument that these folks have been making. And what's frustrating and angering is the policy mechanisms that are happening. And I say, look, Republicans hate working people. Look at what they do. And I look at this child labor push. Multiple states simultaneously running child labor bills to break down the number of hours kids can work, to break down how late they can work, to break down the kinds of jobs they can do. Why? Because corporate America needs cheap labor. And it's really quite remarkable when the solution is not putting 9-year-olds on the kill floor of a meatpacking plant, but having a sane, rational immigration policy. Having a policy that does reward work. Because the sad reality, a lot of the jobs that are going unfilled are the jobs that don't pay anything, that people can't live on. So what I hear from my Republican friends quite often is we need to do away with the social safety net. We need to crush that so that people are desperate enough and hungry enough that they're going to take that poverty job, even if it's only $1 an hour. Because as Ron Paul said, we're against the minimum wage. Might as well be $1 an hour. The question is when will we as working people, again, wake up to what's happening right in front of our very eyes? There is an assault on the 20th century. There is an assault on what our grandparents' generation built. And it's not the drag shows and the CTE and the rainbow flag. It's about money. And to steal Rupert Murdoch's line, it's not about red or blue. It's about green. And they are robbing us blind. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Wherever you find yours, you'll find ours. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1930. That was the day hundreds of thousands of activists and unemployed poured into the streets worldwide for International Unemployed Day. It was a coordinated campaign to protest conditions created by the stock market crash just 4 months earlier. Workers and the poor were the first to feel the most devastating impacts of what would quickly become the Great Depression. Organized primarily by communists, the day's actions highlighted the work of the newly formed unemployed councils and had mass appeal. The unemployed councils worked to distribute food, prevent evictions, secure utilities, and link the needs of the unemployed to the trade unions. The councils mobilized the unemployed in support during the strikes as a way to stop scabbing. They organized hunger marches and protests at relief offices. Tens of thousands came out in every city for the Unemployed Day demonstrations. In North America, cities like Boston, Cleveland, Milwaukee, Seattle, and San Francisco all drew massive crowds estimated at 40 to 50,000 each. Protesters demanded jobs and unemployment insurance. In Chicago, tens of thousands overwhelmed the streets for more than 12 hours. In Detroit and New York City, competing organizers challenged the crowd estimates with as many as 100,000 turning out in each city. Confrontations broke out between protesters and the police in both cities. Across the country, many of the unemployed were arrested or hospitalized. In New York City, outraged communist activists asserted that protesters were met with water hoses, tear gas, and guns as they marched down Broadway to City Hall. Critics argued that the crowd estimates were wildly exaggerated. But the day of action forced governments around the world to acknowledge deteriorating conditions and the devastating impact of the Great Depression.
Many of today's right-wing governors and state legislators have a problem by constantly pushing an extremist ideological agenda of nonsense about nutty conspiracy theories while imposing autocratic laws to ban everything from voting to library books. They've become widely ridiculed as some combo of kooky, clownish, and embarrassingly incompetent. That's why it's significant that Missouri's GOP lawmakers have not only recognized their image problem, but have actually made an effort to demonstrate that they are serious-minded public officials concerned about their professionalism. Namely, the State House of Representatives has adopted a dress code. Seriously. Specifically, the attire mandate addresses the pressing state issue of female lawmakers who come to work dressed normally but without jackets. Disapproving legislative leaders clucked that this fashion faux pas was undermining the public's respect for them. But now, says GOP Representative Ann Kelly, sponsor of the new code, quote, it has been fixed. Henceforth, all women legislators in the Show Me state must wear blazers or cardigans in order to, as Kelly explained, always maintain a formal and professional atmosphere in the House. Professional? Excuse me, but these far-right state legislatures totter between being goofy policy forums and carnival sideshows. The only proper attire for many of these so-called legislative leaders would be straitjackets. One lawmaker even claimed that the code was about protecting freedom. The clothing mandate, she explained, eliminates the possibility that the state will be the clothing police. This is Jim Hightower saying, I'm thinking of moving to Missouri. It must be wonderful to live in a state where the government has already fixed all the big problems people really care about, letting the legislative body focus on properly clothing its women members.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, some hopeful news. This is one of those things where I have some hope that there is the possibility, and I know maybe I'm just being too optimistic, but there are opportunities for our political system to work to make people's lives better. And this is a small thing, but it is kind of a step forward that we can agree maybe children shouldn't go hungry at school. That's why I've asked my next guest to come share some thoughts. When we did our Working Class Heroes tour, we ran into Sammy Sheets running for State House in Iowa. And, again, talking about working class values. And I'm thrilled to see that he has proposed his first piece of legislation to eliminate a two-tier system differentiating between free and reduced meals to make sure that kids get fed. Personally, I would like to see lunch free for all kids, but that's never going to happen. But that's why I've asked my good friend Sammy Sheets to come share some thoughts. Sammy, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me, Rick.
So walk me through this legislation that you've got. What are you working on? I see it's a bipartisan piece of legislation, which gives me hope that some of our Republican friends do have a soul. Walk me through it.
Yeah, so basically in Iowa we have right now two-tiered system for free and reduced lunch. So if you make up to 130% of the poverty line, your family does. Family of four, the state pays for, and USDA sets this limit, pays for your lunch. So you don't have to pay to go to breakfast and lunch at school. If you make up to 185%, which is a family that in Iowa makes around $65,000 a year, family of four, you do have to pay. But during the pandemic, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, the federal government paid for everybody's lunch. And to your points in the opening comments, I would love to see a universal free school lunch program. But what I did this year is, given the fact that Democrats are in the minority in our legislature, I tried to see how many steps forward could I take and get Republicans on board. So my bill, House File 575 in the Iowa legislature, does is it eliminates that two-tiered system. So if you're any family that makes 180% of the poverty line, which like I said is around $64,000 a year for a family of four, your lunch is paid for. So you don't have to, as of last month, the federal government stopped paying and stopped doing universal free lunch through the ARPA funds. And so these kids would have had to start going back and paying for school lunch again, which is wrong. Like I said, everybody should have free school lunch. But what I was really happy about, Rick, is that through tons and tons of conversations with Republican colleagues, I was able to get 20 Republicans to co-sponsor my bill. And that is almost unheard of. They don't let people like me get wins. And from what I know, a bunch of the Republicans that did sign on were chastised by their leadership for agreeing to this piece of legislation. But for $1 million, you know, we talked about this last time I was on. Republicans just passed a $1 billion school voucher bill. So this is $1 million a year to make sure that 26,000 kids in Iowa that currently have to pay for lunch would not have to pay for lunch. So this is a no-brainer to me, and I'm really, really excited that it had bipartisan support.
No, this is good. I mean, it's a good first step, you know, because the sad thing is you see these stories, you know, all over the place, you know, where kids are having their lunches taken from them because they have an outstanding balance. And, you know, I've got a listener who, you know, constantly reminds me that the amount of debt that kids have on these school lunch programs is just outrageous. And it shouldn't be this way, because ultimately, and I'm sure you've done the research having proposed this legislation, we know that if kids are hungry, they're not learning. The research is there's no gray area. If kids get breakfast and lunch, they're going to do so much better. So it seems like an investment for the future instead of going, well, sorry, you can't pay, so you get nothing. It's insane what we do to poor people.
Absolutely. Yep. And I try not to just think of, you know, the economic argument, but you're right that it's going to produce kids that are actually learning in our schools. I think that kids just shouldn't go hungry in the state of Iowa. They should have their breakfast and lunch paid for. I think every kid should. But what this will do is, at least for a lot of working class families that qualify, that make 180% of the poverty level, or around $64,000 a year in Iowa, that's going to provide stability and economic security for those families. And that's a small step, like I said. And like you said, this is not the end goal, but I have to work with the political realities that I have in the legislature. So to try and get something, I mean, you can do the simple math. We got 36 Democrats, 50 or 20 Republicans signed on. That's 56 votes. It will pass if it gets a vote in the Iowa House. And that's 26,000 families that are going to be impacted by this legislation. It's not a end-all final step, but I think it's a damn good first step.
You said if.
Sorry?
You said if.
I did say if. Yep, because I'm not sure it's going to get a vote. The Republican leadership has to decide whether it gets a vote or not. And as of now, it has not been scheduled for a committee hearing or a vote. And it could very well be dead. I don't know. That's not my decision.
Well, how cruel.
What comes up for a vote or not.
How cruel. And again, I say the cruelty is always the point, but how cruel.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And I thought, you know, getting 20 Republicans on board, which, like I said, almost never happens for any piece of legislation, would force their leadership to bring it to a vote, but haven't seen it yet to date. So...
yeah, my mind tends towards the economic, because if you're going to argue to Republicans, you've got to make the economic benefits.
Yep.
You know, the cost benefit analysis is going to cost us, you know, less down the road, you know, in remediation and you know, prison costs and you name it. So then maybe they go, oh, you know, what was that ounce of prevention, pound of cure thing? You remember that guy who said that a long time ago? You may remember him, had a flag with a key on it, a kite with a key on it. Remember him? Yeah. But, you know, there's also the moral argument that I make, having lived through going through this. Because I remember as a kid having to go to the free lunch line, and it wasn't the lunch line that everyone else got to go through. So there was that stigma that came along with, oh, you're the poor kid. And that's another one of these things that should be taken out of the school system. Look, there's enough that kids have to deal with going to school and dealing with peer pressure. This shouldn't be one of them.
I agree, and that's why the end goal needs to be universal free school lunch. This has to be a program that, like our public education system in general, does not discriminate based on, what economic class your family's in. And so our school lunch system in Iowa needs to do the same exact thing, not separate kids based on the amount of money that their parents have. And so, like I said, this is the first step. God willing, down the road, we'll be able to pass universal free school lunch like kids in Iowa and across the country have had over the past couple of years of the pandemic.
Yeah. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show. It's Iowa State Representative Sammy Sheets talking about his piece of legislation to make sure that kids get fed at school. This is not a difficult one. This is a no-brainer. You said a second ago that because of the ARPA money, that lunch had been paid for the last 2 years. That it's now gone. End of the last month, beginning of this month, it went. As did the SNAP benefits. We've now hit a SNAP cliff, if you will, and families are going to get less money to put food on the table. Are you guys talking about how you're going to either make that up or deal with what's coming? Because the next couple of months, hunger is going to go up. I know we love to call it food insecurity, but hunger is going to go up. Poverty numbers are going to go up. Childhood poverty numbers are going to go up. Are you guys dealing with that? I know you had your SNAP thing going on, which was horrible. But is there any talk on how to help with that, or is it just continue to make it worse?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I'm not in the federal government. I wish our federal government in Washington, D.C. made the child benefits.
No, I get you're not in the federal government, Sammy.
Yeah, no,
this
I know.
falls on the states. The SNAP money goes from the federal government to states. The states use it. Now there's a hole in your budgets. Now you don't have the money. Your state is going to end up having more hungry people. Is the state considering how they're going to deal with the shortfall? Some states are going to make up the difference. How is your state going to deal with this?
Well, the Republicans are planning to use, we have a couple $1 billion surplus in our state budget, and the Republicans' plan with that money is to eliminate the state income tax in the next couple of years here, which will cost literally billions of dollars in revenue. They plan on increasing the sales tax to make up for that shortfall in revenue, the most regressive form of taxation that we have, because obviously, why not beat down on working class people more and end our progressive taxation system that we've had in the state for decades? That's a huge plan. And instead of, a colleague of mine had an excellent post on social media the other day about all the things our state house Republicans have done to fight inflation and help working people. And the tweet was blank, obviously, because they haven't done anything, Rick, to help working people. They have spent the vast majority of their time, like you mentioned, cutting benefits for some of the most vulnerable Iowans that are on SNAP benefits. They've spent time attacking the most vulnerable kids in our state. Those are the transgender community, passing bathroom bills, following Florida with banning gender-affirming care in this state. We were here up at the Capitol till 2 a.m. debating those bills last week, and unfortunately they passed. So they're not giving a damn about working people. They're hell-bent on, fighting their culture wars. And when they do actually talk about economic issues, like always, it's in the interests of the wealthy and corporations. They didn't have any problem last year spending $300 million on a tax cut for some of the wealthiest Iowans and corporations, instead of giving, working people who had just gone through a pandemic and record high inflation a break. They said the wealthy need a break and corporations need a break. That's the kind of leadership we're getting from Republicans in our state legislature.
Yeah. Now they do have an inflation plan that I've kind of noticed, an inflation plan that's kind of becoming apparent in Republican circles. It's putting children to work. That's how they're going to help families deal with inflation. More people out in the workforce. Get those kids competing with mom and dad for those jobs. Get rid of that union janitor and get those kids to clean those toilets like Newt Gingrich wanted a couple of years ago. That seems to be, because your state's not the only one. I mean, you've got a really bad bill, as you know better than anyone. But Ohio's doing it. I guess Tennessee's doing it. Arkansas is about ready to pass a bill. They've passed it. I guess Sarah Huckabee Sanders, I guess, is about to sign a bill that would basically do away with work permits for kids as young as 9 years old. I mean, it's crazy, but it seems like it's a concerted effort because we need cheap labor, Sammy.
Yeah, I mean, it's disgusting. We had a great rally here with organized labor and the labor movement and a lot of just working folks that showed up to the Capitol last week. We had great turnout. A couple hundred people came to say that our kids are not for sale in the state of Iowa. Just because you're not willing to pay the wages that'll attract people to the state and actually have a real workforce, you resort to bringing kids back to coal mines and meatpacking plants. It's disgusting. It's horrible and it's wrong. And they're not willing to address the core problems that are creating our workforce shortage in this state. The bills that I just mentioned, if you want to talk about even the Economic Alliance or the Chambers of Commerce in the state are saying that the legislation they're proposing to hate on transgender and LGBTQ plus kids in this state is impacting workforce development and our ability to attract workers to the state of Iowa. So instead of paying a living wage for workers, instead of supporting some of the most marginalized kids in our state, they've decided that the solution is to bring 14-year-olds back into the workforce, some of the most dangerous jobs that we have in the state. I mean, it's literally like Upton Sinclair 100 years ago would be turning in his grave looking at the legislation in 2023 that states, not just Iowa, but Iowa are trying to pass to bring kids out of the classrooms and into the workforce.
But the thing is, I keep coming back to, why don't we hear more of this? Why aren't we hearing more? Why isn't Fox News talking about how much they love the children? Oh, that's right, they don't care.
No, what I'm really grateful for is our Labor Secretary, Marty Walsh. I know he's on his way out, but he was finally sounding the alarm on national news last week, talking about Iowa, talking about how terrible these bills are for workers and for kids. This is not, this is not the first step. They already gutted collective bargaining in Iowa and a bunch of these states that you're talking about. And when the results of weakening labor laws and making it really hard to protect workers leads to a shortage in workers in the state, their solution is to just use more draconian laws. And it's not a solution to the huge problem that we're facing in the state. But unfortunately, the Republicans are hell-bent on pursuing these really, really terrible, dangerous policies.
We are most certainly in dangerous times. Just crazy stuff. And the thing is, I remember it wasn't too long ago, Tom Harkin was your senator, a great salt-of-the-earth guy. I always thought Iowa was a solid Democratic moderate Democratic state with good, solid working class values that would look at a bill like yours and go, well, of course we feed the children because ultimately we make the food. It seems to me you guys make all the food. It would be simple and wouldn't be very costly. You could probably source it all locally. You could probably have the best lunch program in the entire world, sourced local, farm to table, could be an education program. But no.
I mean, think about, we've talked on your program before about, and I know you had J.D. Schultz on, talk about this horrible SNAP bill. They've amended it, but the original version of their bill that 40 of them signed on to, 40 House Republicans, would have banned Iowans on SNAP benefits from consuming fresh meat and American cheese. Think about the state that we're in, how important agriculture is to our economy, and the Republicans were going to ban Iowans from consuming our meat and our dairy products. It's insane.
Well, no, it's not. Not when you think about it with the frame that I do. The cruelty is the point.
Yep.
It's simply the cruelty is the point, and I'm not shocked by it at all. So last question I've got, how can we help you get this across the board? How can we help you get a vote on this? I mean, to me, this is the simplest thing. How do we get a vote?
We got to pressure the Speaker of the House, who's Pat Grassley, the grandson of U.S. Senator Chuck Grassley, who's the leader of the Republicans in the Iowa House. It's his decision. I'm having as many constituents across the state trying to contact him, put pressure on him to give this a vote. Because like I said, if this gets a vote, this has 36 Democrats and 20 Republicans. That's 56. I was never great at math, but that legislation would pass and 26,000 kids in the state of Iowa would be able to have free lunch. And so for any of your listeners that are in Iowa, or they don't even have to be in Iowa, you can contact the Speaker's office. All his contact information is on our legislative website. Please tell Pat Grassley to give this a vote.
We will most certainly get that out there and get people on social media to reach out and yell early and often. But, Sammy, I appreciate the time. Great stuff. I look forward to having you back again real soon.
Thank you so much, Rick. You have a good night.
You too. Good stuff. Sammy Sheets, Iowa State Representative. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around.
The phone lines are open. Give Rick a call at 1-866-416-RICK. That's 1-866-416-7425.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1857. That was the day the U.S. Supreme Court handed down one of its most infamous decisions. It was known as the Dred Scott case. Dred Scott had been born into slavery. He was owned by a military man named John Emerson. His military service brought Emerson from the slave state of Missouri to the free state of Illinois and then the free territory of Wisconsin. While in Wisconsin, Scott married. Emerson's career path then turned back to Missouri. A few years later, Emerson died. Scott attempted to purchase freedom for himself and his wife. When he was not successful, he took his case to the courts, claiming that his time on free soil should have granted him freedom. The Supreme Court decision was devastating for Dred Scott and for all who opposed slavery. In a 7-2 decision, the court ruled that as a black man, Scott had no claim on citizenship under the U.S. Constitution. The majority opinion left no ambiguity, saying Scott, quote, had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. But the court went even further. It ruled that the Missouri Compromise of 1820 was unconstitutional. This meant that according to the court, Congress could not move to prohibit slavery in any U.S. territories. Reaction in the North by those who supported free labor was swift and angry. The Chicago Daily Tribune declared, "It is the first step in a revolution which, if not arrested, nullifies the Revolution of '76 and makes us all slaves again." The Dred Scott decision sharpened tensions over the question of slavery and marched the nation closer to civil war. Today's Labor History in 2 brought to you in memory of Carol Hillman, a passionate friend of workers and volunteer of the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
You know, I always get a kick out of Republican plans. And again, as I said a moment ago, they do have an inflation plan. Republicans do have an inflation plan, and that's to get people to work more. You should be working 60, 70, 80 hours a week. And if you and your wife can't make it, well, get those children out there. Start pumping out kids. We're literally going back 100 years. We're literally going back into the ages where you had kids just so you could work the farm. Now it's just to put food on the table and a roof over the head. This is craziness. And all of their plans, all of their schemes, all of the things they come out with designed to make the wealthy wealthier, the rich and powerful richer and more powerful, and the working class more desperate and, well, like a hamster on the wheel. You never get off until you croak. And I look at this sales tax scheme. Again, this keeps popping up in a lot of places. You know, if you remember, Kevin McCarthy's health care plan, it's all about the sales tax. You remember we're going to get rid of, stuff. That's Social Security. We're going to get rid of this stuff, and we're going to bring in a national, we're going to end income tax, going to do away with the IRS. We're going to bring in a sales tax. Again, we know who this hurts. But what they do is masterfully, again, this is masterful. They play on a sense of fairness, that we should all pay the same rate. Whether you make $1 million a year or you make $2 million, you should all pay the same rate. And you go, but hold on, if you're making $1 million a year, I don't know, 30% of $1 million is a lot of money, but not really going to affect your ability to put food on the table as it would someone making 10 grand a year. But that's not the point, is it? The point is to starve the federal government. Grover Norquist's, I want to make the government so small we can drag it in the bathtub and drown it. And then we want desperate workers. People who are going to show up to the job day after day after day, and not participate in the wealth that these companies make. And what was interesting is, the president talked about manufacturing over the weekend, put out a tweet about manufacturing jobs and how, we need to help mom and pop, small businesses on Main Street. And I said, one of the best ways we can help mom and pop on Main Street is make sure that we unionize big employers. We make sure that workers have the ability to collectively bargain for better wages, hours, conditions. Nothing helps mom and pop on Main Street more than a working class that has disposable income. Nothing. There's nothing you can do for mom and pop on Main Street that's going to make it easier for them to survive than to have workers with disposable income. And how do you do that? Well, higher wages. And how do you do that? Collectively bargaining. Because these companies don't, out of the goodness of their heart and their benevolence, give people raises. And that's been shown over the last 40 years as labor's power has been diminishing. As union density has been falling, guess what has been falling as well? Your wages. I was at the gym today talking to a guy, and we just happened to strike up this conversation about, the destruction of families and, all of this stuff. And I said, the reason the families are getting broke up, bad conservative policies and the destruction of labor unions. The second that you could no longer survive on one income, the second that you could no longer make sure that you led a solid existence with bread and roses and an ability to save for college and take vacations and get a new car every once in a while and all of that. Now you got to send two people out in the workforce to do what one used to do. And now, hell, thanks to the Republicans, you better send the kids out just to survive. The second you started breaking up the unions and redistributing wealth the way we've done the last 40 years, this country went to hell in a handbag. Because now you got a handful of really, really powerful people who have such control that they don't want to give it up. Certainly not to a bunch of working people. Certainly not to people who they see as beneath them and replaceable. But again, and masterfully so, they have figured out how to divide and conquer. I can pay half the working class to murder the other half. And we see this played out time and time again. Which is why, again, I keep coming back. I love Joe Biden. Wasn't my first choice, but I'll tell you, the things he's pushing, transformational. If only we could get Democrats on the same page and Republicans the heck out of the way. I want to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com.
The historic string of storms drenched the state and have many wondering whether our drought could soon be over.
Nope. Despite a series of major storms, California's historic drought continues.
Norfolk Southern and the other freight rail companies need to stop fighting us.
Nope. Railroad industry already fighting new safety regulations in the wake of the Ohio derailment disaster. Plus,
record warmth across several states in the U.S. has caused trees and plants to bloom weeks ahead of schedule.
Bizarre weather continues as parts of U.S. see earliest spring conditions on record.
Earliest spring, it's freezing out here in California. All of those stories and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
You're traveling through another dimension. A dimension not only of sight and sound, but of mind. There's a signpost up ahead. Your next stop, the Weather Channel.
This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, I don't know what you global warming people did, but whatever you're doing, it must be working because it is freezing out here in California.
Well, I'm sorry that you don't like the cold weather.
I don't like it one bit. As a matter of fact, I've been in Southern California 30 years. It has never been this cold. So whatever you did, knock it off.
Okay. Well, on to our top story. A string of major atmospheric rivers have nearly filled several of California's major reservoirs, and a couple of rare blizzards have helped push California's snowpack to nearly twice its normal levels. The unexpected bounty of water amid the deepest drought in the state in 1,200 years has prompted state and federal water managers to increase their expected allocation of water to the state's agriculture industry in 2023.
Good news.
However, experts say it will take more than a series of storms to make up for years of deficits.
No.
Here's Andrew Schwartz of the UC Berkeley Snow Lab.
We've gone from extreme and exceptional to kind of a moderate status, and that continues to shrink. We're not at a point yet where we can declare all of our drought over. We need to be able to conserve water and keep moving forward as though we don't have plenty of water. And every drop saved now will be available when we do have a shortage.
And there's also the danger that spring heat waves will trigger a fast melt